Barbara Schiltz is a nutrition educator and consultant with over 45 years' experience in the clinical arena. Barb gained her experience as a research investigator at the Functional Medicine Research Center in Gig Harbor, Washington, where she monitored patients undergoing clinical trials for insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, obesity, and food allergies. She was instrumental in developing the Low Glycemic Index Modified Mediterranean Dietary Program for first-line therapy. She is co-author of The Ultimate Metabolism Diet, Eat Right for Your Metabolic Type, and has written many articles, including one with Deanna Minnick on dietary approaches for metabolic syndrome, which was published in Metabolic Syndrome and Related Disorders.
Hello, my name is Barb Schiltz, and I'm here to talk about the elimination diet and tell you everything you ever wanted to know about how to do an elimination diet with your patients. Why is it necessary? How to do it? Walking your patient through it? Talking about why foods are okay and why other foods are not? Talking about substitutions, and then the real challenge of introducing the foods back into their diet. We call those challenge foods. And then we will talk about frequently asked questions in the Q&A afterwards. So you have this Elimination Diet Comprehensive Guide, and that is very comprehensive, and pretty much any question you might have can be answered in there. So use that. Now, when a patient comes to you, you're going to be wondering what kind of an intervention to do with that patient. You always have to remember that food is energy, it's information, it's connectedness, and it's medicine. And some people come to you without any real big complaints. However, that's rare. Most of the time, people have some big complaints when they seek out nutritional advice. If I had my choice, I would probably try to put everybody on an elimination diet first off, because it gives you such wonderful information on how to personalize their whole dietary plan. So all of the dietary programs that IFM has, they all contain 8 features, and these are the 8 features that the elimination diet has. The first feature we're going to talk about is food triggers. So the elimination diet identifies the most common food triggers that cause people to have adverse food reactions, whether they're allergy or sensitivity or intolerance. It doesn't make much difference what they are. We just want to identify them so that patients know. So by doing an elimination diet, we remove the most common sources of adverse food reactions and replace those with nutrient-dense, really high-quality foods. So it's helpful by uncovering those foods that are not good for each patient. It assists in clearing the playing field and thereby lifts the burden on the immune system and allowing the body to heal properly. Finally, the elimination diet helps them to begin to transition to a much cleaner diet. Most patients, when they come to you, are eating really pretty crummy food. So it's very nice to have a better idea of what is a cleaner, healthier diet. So a lot of people think that if they don't have digestive problems, why bother doing an elimination diet? Well, there's so many other complaints that people have in addition to digestive problems. Those GI problems are probably among the most common because almost everybody has problems with reflux, with constipation, diarrhea, gas and bloating. But in addition to that, you can have patients that complain of chronic sinus problems and headaches. Low energy is a big one. That's a very common problem where chronic fatigue, not chronic fatigue syndrome, because that's a much bigger entity, but just people who are just complaining about low energy. Irritability, depression, and mood swings are often, people think that there's other causes to them and wouldn't even think that food could be connected. And then skin problems such as eczema or psoriasis. Joint aches are very, very common. I think that that's among the biggest thing that I see people say is much, much better. And then asthma is another one. But there are many, many more. Anything that your patients complain of that's chronic, anything that they say is with them most of the time, you can really suspect that food is connected. Now, the adverse food reactions can be immunological, caused by the immune system, and those can be an actual food allergy, which is usually an IgE reaction, or it can be a hypersensitivity, which can be an IgG and IgM reaction, or the others named here. An IgE usually happens right away within 15 or 20 minutes, and that's what you usually know of as anaphylactic reactions. People they eat something like strawberries, which seem to be common, or shellfish, and they have trouble breathing. That's an IgE allergy reaction. An IgG hypersensitivity reaction is very delayed, and it's around for a long time. And you can eat a food, and 2 days later you can have a reaction. It's most common to occur within the first 24 hours, but I've seen people go 48 hours having a reaction before they have a reaction. But so those are the immunological ones. And then we have the non-immunological ones, which are really due to intolerances to different food additives or histamines or salicylates, or a deficiency of the milk enzyme called lactase. So these are all different reasons why people have food allergies. Now, someone might come to you and say, well, I just want to take a blood test. Well, there's no blood test for intolerances and some hypersensitivities. You can have a blood test to detect where there's any actual allergy, but since most of people's adverse reactions are due to non-immunological reactions, the blood tests are not very accurate, and it can give them a false sense of security. When I first had this allergy testing done many, many years ago, I was sure I was allergic to wheat, but it didn't show up on there. It said wheat was just fine. And so that was when I realized that these blood tests are really not worth a whole lot because they don't pick up the non-immunological foods. So the elimination diet removes all these foods on the left and allows you to eat all these foods on the right. Why did we choose these foods? Because these foods are the foods that are the most commonly associated with food reactions. They are the most susceptible to be causing problems. So I always ask people, what's your favorite food? What food do you go to when you're really hungry? And someone will say, well, I can't wait to eat bread. Let's forget about sugar and desserts right now, but oftentimes people will say, oh, the first thing I go for is bread. But some people will say, I really can't wait to have a glass of milk. Other people will say, oh, I love to eat popcorn. That's my go-to food. Anytime people are really connected to and what we might call addicted to a food, that's probably one of the most suspicious foods that they're going to have reactions to. So just keep that as a pearl in the back of your head. So corn, dairy, eggs, gluten, sugars, all sugars, not just white table sugar, shellfish, soy, beef, pork, processed meats, coffee, tea, and chocolate. These are all the foods that are really important to remove because of the reasons why I said. They're just the most likely ones to cause reactions. Peanuts should be on this list, and they're not. So they are in the comprehensive guide. And then on the foods to eat, these are all healthy, nutrient-dense foods that are really important foods to eat when you're looking to improve your diet for any particular reason. And remember that the elimination diet is the gold standard for detecting food allergies. Now my computer is misbehaving. Okay. The next feature is that it reduces inflammation. So trigger foods can cause inflammation in your body, and those trigger foods might be any of those foods there. The body can stop fighting off what it perceives to be a threat when you remove those foods. So food reactions of any type can trigger low-grade inflammatory reactions. And what happens when that occurs? It makes the intestinal wall much more porous and exposes the intestines to large undigested food particles that seep into your bloodstream. And that is called a leaky gut. You probably have heard that terminology, leaky gut, intestinal permeability. It causes to have more food allergies when, as the gut gets leakier, more food sensitivities or allergies occur. Inflammation is reduced on the elimination diet because only those foods known to be anti-inflammatory are included in this plan. The next feature is supporting healthy microbiome. The microbiome is becoming one of our big conversations these days because everybody's talking about the gut. So a diet rich in healing, nutrient-dense foods leads to a better structure in your cell and a more diverse gut in the microbiome sense. Better immunity because 70% of your immune system is in the intestines. So if you have a leaky gut, how can your immune system possibly be good? Now we want to talk about probiotic and prebiotic foods because these foods are particularly helpful in making the microbiome more healthy. Now, all of these foods are probiotic and prebiotic, as you can see on these lists. Unfortunately, for the elimination diet, those that are crossed out or in red can't be had because they are in dairy-free. I mean, they're dairy foods, and so we're only focusing on dairy-free foods right now. So keep this list in mind because after the elimination diet is finished, then people can try these other foods that they haven't been able to use. Now, coconut kefir. Kefir comes in coconut, so you can try that with your patients if they like coconut. Not everyone likes coconut, however. So keep this list in mind. The next feature is dairy-free, gluten-free, and this is probably the most common two sensitivities, allergies that we see in our patients are dairy foods and gluten foods. So these are critical. And the comprehensive guide will talk a lot about substitutions for these foods. Although honestly, I miss yogurt. And so I've been trying to make my own homemade coconut yogurt because it's hard to find it in the unsweetened variety. So our next slide is going to talk about phytonutrients that heal the gut. So there's a broad variety of fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds and legumes that provide compounds that promote healing and allow your cells to function better. Now look at this very colorful list of foods. There's 6 different colors, and I usually ask my patients to have one from each group at least every day. Some of them are very easy to get, like reds and oranges and greens. The blue and purple black ones are a little more difficult. The yellows are not as common. The white, tan, and brown are, and some people think that white, tan, and brown, what good are they because they're not colorful, but they have a lot of anti-cancer benefits and a lot of antimicrobial benefits. They're really good for the GI system, so don't think that they're not good just because they're not real colorful. Our next slide talks about the elimination diet feature of reducing toxic burden. When we reduce the toxic burden in the body by avoiding processed foods and focusing on organic, non-GMO sources, that reduces our exposure to foodborne toxins and to chemicals. The food supply is so full of additives and flavorings and preservatives, pesticides and insecticides that all come along with conventionally grown whole foods and also that are in processed foods. One of the biggest nutritional burdens in our society has to do with the sweeteners that are added to all the processed foods. It's appalling to me. So by removing these foods and eating a cleaner diet, this helps to increase the liver's ability to eliminate these toxins. So the next slide is no calorie restriction. And this is a big one for a lot of people. Many people think they're going to lose a lot of weight on the elimination diet. That's not a goal of this food plan. It may happen or it may not happen because the body is coming back into balance. But calorie control is not the focus. What is essential is to eat only the foods that are on the food plan, and we don't want you to be hungry. Over many years of using this approach, practitioners have found the diet for detecting food allergies to be well tolerated and quite beneficial. It may also be helpful in establishing or reestablishing a more healthy relationship to food for those who have become obsessed about counting calories. I've come across this quite a lot, and it's hard for some people. Now, the elimination diet also promotes body awareness to food. After going through the elimination diet, the eliminated foods are re-challenged one at a time to help identify potential triggers. Introducing one food at a time is important because it leads to greater clarity about those trigger foods. While on the diet, and especially during reintroduction, you should urge your patients to pay attention to their body and see how it feels when they eat certain foods. I remember when I first realized that I was feeling like my cup was half empty instead of half full. I'm a very positive person, but every time I had gluten, I was feeling just kind of blah about everything, and it was a real aha moment for me. So encourage your patients to do that. Being on the elimination diet for even a few weeks can lead to changes in their taste buds and a greater level of sensitivity to trigger foods. Overall, they will be much more in touch with their body's responses to food, and this is to cherish. It's a really good result. So now we have general guidelines. This is very important. It goes into much more detail in the comprehensive guide, but particularly 2 weeks before, or 1 week if they don't have enough time, before starting, eliminating caffeine slowly is really an important thing. Otherwise, patients get severe headaches. And I suggest that first they do 3/4 regular coffee and 1/4 decaf in their cup, and you can get that in Starbucks, or you can make it at home that way. And then after a couple days, 2 or 3 days, go to half decaf and half regular. And then after a couple of days, go to 3/4 decaf and 1/4 regular until they're down to all decaf. And then after all decaf for a couple of days, there's a little bit of caffeine in decaf, so they're going to get some caffeine. But after a few days of being on all decaf, then be ready to stop completely having any caffeine. So after doing that, when the program starts, they will need to adhere to the food list for about 3 weeks. Some practitioners will say 4 weeks. Honestly, I prefer 3 weeks. It makes it very tedious to go 4 weeks. Then at the end of that 3-week period, one at a time, foods are reintroduced. This is called challenging. Every 2 days, keeping a careful record of any reactions. And this is so important because sometimes people aren't aware of their reactions. If someone gets up feeling kind of blah one day, that's not a good time to challenge a food because you don't know if you're going to continue feeling blah all day or if it was caused by a food. So it's good to have a start off on a baseline normal day for people when you start challenging foods. And if you're not sure of having a reaction, you can wait until that reaction goes away and you're not sure if it's caused by the food. You can re-challenge that same food. This is very important. You want to make sure that you're not combining foods one at a time. For example, pizza has both gluten and dairy in it, so you wouldn't want to use pizza. You would want to use a glass of milk or cheese for a dairy allergy, for a dairy challenge, or for a wheat challenge, you'd want to use perhaps pasta or a whole wheat tortilla. So keeping a careful record is very critical. Now, once the food is okay, there's 2 ways of going around about this. I have always done with my patients, I keep all the foods out until I'm finished challenging, but the Elimination Diet Food Plan as developed by IFM has sort of changed my mind, and so I'm trying this out. And we're saying that once a food tests okay, that you can put it back in, and so it makes it much easier. And is there any order for you to do? No. Some people say, I just miss my coffee. Well, then put your coffee back in. Some people miss their language, their, sorry, not your language. They're missing their alcohol, and so they might want to put wine back in. Whatever you miss the most, you can start off with. It really doesn't matter. You're going to then take those reactive foods that hopefully there's only 1 or 2 of them and remove them from your diet for 3 to 6 months. Your practitioner will instruct specifically if they have an opinion about those. And then at the end of 3 or 6 months, those foods can be rechallenged. Now, reactions can be transient, meaning that they're only around if you eat that food all the time. And if you eat them only once in a while, you won't react to them. And then some reactions are permanent. No matter how long you stay away from them, they don't ever go away. So this comprehensive guide is going to help you personalize this program for your patients, because some people might need to be off salicylates or histamines. And you can see on this food list that if you see in the lower corner here, there's the high histamine and nightshades foods are highlighted in red and green, and then those really healthy fermented foods are highlighted in purple. So that's a nice thing for you to see. So now we're going to go over, this is what I spend most of my time with patients. I go over every single food list and I talk about what foods are you likely to eat here. People will say, well, how come I can't eat pork? Well, pork's not such a clean meat. It's very hard to find organic pork. And later on, they can go back to eating pork, but if it tests okay. But these are the foods that they should be able to find something on here that they like. So I always start with fish because fish is so healthy, and salmon isn't particularly healthy. So we're hoping that they like some fish, and they might or might not be exposed to wild game. Some people like lamb, some people don't like lamb at all. And then you have your poultry, and most people will have poultry. So then we talk about those foods that they need to eliminate that are listed down there, right down here. And then legumes are also protein foods. Excuse me. Legumes are also protein foods, and I like to talk about them as carefully as the animal protein foods, because some patients are vegetarian. And they'll say, well, can I really do this diet as a vegetarian? Of course you can. So you have bean soups, and you have lentils and peas and all different kinds of beans that can be combined with rice. And you can use legume flour to bake with. And green peas they're kind of a common vegetable that people like and don't realize that it actually is a legume. Hummus is a wonderful dip. And refried beans, if they're vegetarian, are good. The ones that are not vegetarian have not very good fats and oils in them. You know what? One really interesting legume that you can't have on this program is edamame. And when I like people to challenge soy by trying edamame if they like them, because edamame is such a great non-animal protein, such a great vegetable protein and a really good snack. There's no dairy foods at all on this program, so we talk about which they might like here. And they don't really need to eat any dairy if they don't want to. But if they miss dairy, they can try plain coconut yogurt that's unsweetened, and coconut kefir, and then those alternative milks. And they really need to understand that they really have to be off all other sources of dairy. Nuts and seeds are an important thing to have. I like my patients to have at least 2 servings of these every day, because they're a nice calorically dense, but in nutrient dense as well, foods that really stave off hunger. And they have lots of phytonutrients in them, so it's a nice thing to have. The only nuts that they can't have are peanuts. Fats and oils, I like patients to have a good amount of fats and oils. I have patients that tell me that they eat their salads dry, and that's not really healthy. You really want to have good, healthy oils, and the oils that are good to have are listed here. And also we have avocado, and we have olives. Olives are a great snack food. Remember, people are going to be hungry when they're missing all their foods, but a snack like olives is another calorically dense, nutrient dense food that can be a great snack. So now we have page 2, and we're going to talk about the vegetables. And I like my patients to have 8 to 10 to 12 servings of vegetables a day. They look at me cross-eyed when I tell them that, because most people barely eat 2 or 3 servings. But really, a serving is only a half a cup. And so if you have a serving of broccoli, a couple of heads of broccoli, a couple little florets of broccoli is at least a half a cup. So it's really not so hard to get a cup. And then for salad, raw greens or just even raw spinach or kale, a cup is a serving there. So there's a really good selection of vegetables. There are no vegetables other than corn, which really isn't a vegetable, that are not allowed on this program. Starchy vegetables are in a separate category, but people can eat whatever starchy vegetables they want. I usually suggest people eat one of these a day if they want to, but they don't have to. My favorite here is sweet potatoes or yams, but those purple phytonutrients that are really hard to get can be gotten in purple potatoes, which people don't even realize exist. So that's a good thing to suggest. If you're avoiding nightshades because your doctor wants you to, you can tell the patients that potatoes are not a good food for them. Now, all of these fruits are okay. Citrus fruits are sometimes avoided if the practitioner directs patients to do that. I haven't seen too many reactions to citrus fruits, but occasionally I have. Not to limes or lemons, but maybe to oranges, not really to grapefruits either. But a couple of fruits every day is a nice way to fill up a void when people are used to having sweets. Gluten-free grains. Okay, so I find that most patients are likely to have rice or quinoa or oats. The other grains like amaranth and buckwheat and millet and teff are a little unusual, and they need to have get used to the taste of them. So you might encourage them to try them, but at least the quinoa is becoming more popular today, and quinoa is a better source of protein than almost any other grain. So I like patients to try that if they haven't tried it before. And some people are on the paleo diet and they're used to not having any grains at all. If that's what people are doing, they don't have to have any grains at all on this program either. But if they do have grains, they must be gluten-free. Okay, now beverages, anything that they're allowed to drink has to be unsweetened, and they should probably aim for 6 to 8 glasses of water or herbal teas. Herbal teas aren't on this list, but they should be down here with the green tea. And unsweetened coconut water is kind of lovely. It tastes sweet, but it hasn't been sweetened. And I think I like to juice vegetables. I juice vegetables every day, and when I started doing that, I could see that my immune system was much more happy when I started doing that. So hidden foods can be a problem, and I want you to have your patients be aware that they must read labels, because all of these things are present in a lot of the foods that they might be buying. So it's really important for them to become knowledgeable about this. And there's lots of websites on the internet that they can also look at for this. Now we have common barriers to compliance. Convenience is really a big issue. Patients don't want to cook. They don't want to put the time in. They're used to ordering food out or just buying food to bring home, going out to dinner with friends, lunch, even breakfast. So this is going to be an area where you're going to have to be very supportive in giving them suggestions for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Another barrier to compliance is support. We have a lot of temptation when coworkers and family and friends are encouraging patients to eat foods that are not good for them. So the typical donuts in the office are really a huge temptation. So we have to encourage people to be prepared for the tempting situations. So one thing that I like to do is exactly what this slide is showing. Have people meet, instead of meeting for a meal, meet for a walk. And you're combining two things at once: getting healthier, getting the family involved in helping to cook is another way of doing it. Also, just having a conversation with the family about what you're trying to do and enrolling them in helping you. Otherwise, they may unknowingly sabotage you by eating ice cream or keeping it all in the house, and you might try to encourage their families to do those things away from the house. And it's only for 3 weeks. Remind them that 3 weeks is not a very long time when you consider what the gain is going to be. Cost is another issue. Buying organic produce and high quality meats and minimally processed foods can be expensive. If that's the case for your clients, you might want to talk to them about the Environmental Working Group, EWG.org. They have on their website, they have a list of Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. So the Dirty Dozen are the 12 most important foods to buy organically, and the Clean 15 are the ones that have the least amount of pesticides. Now that list changes every year, so you want them to be updating it all the time. I have an app on my iPhone that's free, and it shows you the whole list of all the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen and what's in between, and you can just open that app when you're shopping. It's really helpful. Also, eating out adds up all the time. So if your clients, patients are not eating out all the time, they will actually save money and have that money to buy whole foods. And time is another big, big thing. Because of the lack of convenience, preparing meals from fresh whole foods are time consuming. So if you encourage people to plan ahead, we have menu plans and we have recipes that they can refer to. Go shopping, there's a shopping list. Shop and plan ahead and then cook ahead. Take Sunday afternoon before the work week begins and make a soup. And you can put some in the freezer and keep the rest for your lunches or part of dinner. Make a casserole or so, and it makes a huge difference. Food labels, this is a really big thing too that people are not used to talking about is food labels. They have to become comfortable with reading food labels. There's going to be a webinar on reading food labels down the line, but in the meantime, try to read up on food labels. It's an important one. Doing the elimination diet is a huge investment in health. So when people get discouraged, you might want to talk to them about what's in this for you. You know, what are you hoping to accomplish? Won't it be wonderful if your headaches are gone? Won't it be great if you get your energy back? And that little bit of coaching makes all the difference in the world when you talk about their investment in health. They're much more likely to be able to do it. And honestly, one thing that I forgot to mention is a reaction that people have the first 3 or 4 days of the elimination diet is very discouraging. And this is maybe when you want to remind them of their investment in their health, because they will feel worse before they feel better. You can call it die-off. You can call it a Herxheimer reaction, a detox reaction. It's what happens when the body is not getting the foods that it was used to before, and it's actually withdrawing from those foods. And when my patients call me up and say, I feel horrible, I feel like I'm coming down with the flu, or every joint is hurting, or I have horrible headaches, usually what was bothering them before gets worse. And they'll say, I'm doing this because I don't want headaches anymore, but my headaches are worse. And then what I say is, that's great news. And they look at me like I'm crazy, or there's a pregnant pause if it's a phone call. And the reason is that's telling me that the elimination diet is working. And so that is another huge pearl that I want you to not forget, that to expect them to feel a little crummy for 3 or 4 days, and then on day 5 or 6, they're gonna start feeling a little better. And by the end of week 1, they're gonna say, oh, I can see a difference. And then you don't have to encourage them so much anymore because they're feeling better. Every now and then, this doesn't happen. Why? I don't know. Sometimes they just need longer time to do that. So remember to use your comprehensive guide before you go over an elimination diet with your clients, with your patients. So thank you. And now I want you to realize that you can explain the elimination diet to your patients and why it's necessary. You can walk them through the plan, talk about why foods are included and why others are not, talk about food substitutions. This is important, reintroducing their challenge foods. And then any questions that I haven't answered by telling you about the elimination diet are probably in the FAQs at the end of the guide, and also you'll hear them in the Q&A session after this talk. Thank you very much.